All right, we ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, everybody, we are back. It's Chalkboard History. Dun, 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 dun. Here we are at Ripavilla. It is, November 16th.
Yeah.
Hood's army is still stuck on that side of the Tennessee River and can't get on this side to get into Tennessee. We last filmed, I don't know when, but it's been a while. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about what? The Gettysburg Address. Because it's the 160th anniversary of the Gettysburg Address.
In
given
3 days?
in
19th.
Gettysburg,
November
Pennsylvania.
19th. Yeah.
November 19th, 1863. What's your lead, Professor?
Well, I figured maybe, just maybe, I went ahead. I was like, I'm not going to get flat-footed by this man. I brought a copy of it with me. Because I figured line-by-line explanation, probably not, right? Of
course.
But I think it's important that we think about how he phrases the entire speech, right? The first kind of opening is an address to the past. He's speaking to the history of the nation. 7 years ago, we brought forth to this continent a new nation. And then he starts to speak to the present moment. We are met here on a great battlefield of the Civil War. But then it's the last paragraph where he starts to talk to us, not just to the kind of 16,000 people at Evergreen Cemetery, then the National Cemetery, but he's speaking kind of echoing out through the generations to tell us what the war was about. Thoughts? That's my lead.
I think I said yesterday that because, it's the 160th, it was not that long ago the 150th, and it'll be the 175th, and, Lincoln's words echo through time. And what I think has always puzzled me is, there's this group of people that they despise Lincoln, they think he was a tyrant, they call him names and all this stuff. But, he helped save the country. Mm-hmm. And he helped to end slavery. Of course, he didn't do it alone, but great leaders often have many enemies. Mm-hmm. And I think yesterday I said George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and Ronald Reagan, to me, are presidents who operated on a different level. Mm-hmm. They were acutely aware of the past, but also very aware of the present. But we're always focused on the future, and we're focused on what the United States could be, and at obviously very different times with very different opponents, if you will, very different enemies of the state, very different global situations. But they understood what leadership was, and I think the Gettysburg Address, rather than just the power of the oratory, it's what he was doing. Mm-hmm. If you think about November 19th, 1863, he goes to Gettysburg not to talk about the battle. He never says the word Lee. He never says the word Meade. Mm-hmm. He never says Little Round Top. He doesn't talk about Pickett's charge. What he goes there to talk about 11 months after the Emancipation Proclamation, mm-hmm. which itself was about 9 to 10 months after the Lincoln administration were really forced to deal with the issue of slavery. It's a pivot. Mm-hmm. He is talking to the present, to the people there, but he's talking about what the future could be, the millions yet unborn, mm-hmm. and the promise of what the United States could be. I think that's why we should remember the speech. I think that's why we do, but mm-hmm. I remember standing at the Lincoln Memorial after 9/11 and thinking about, the world as it was right then. And I can't even imagine the world that Lincoln was in personally and obviously politically in 1863 to gather the strength to go to that place, to Gettysburg. And he does refer to, obviously, the federal or the U.S. dead, but he is talking about this is our only chance. Mm-hmm. This is our only chance. He doesn't spit on Southerners or Jeff Davis, not a bunch of name-calling. Mm-hmm. There's right and there's wrong. There's what we are doing and it is what the other side is attempting to do. And that's why I think those four presidents in particular are so important to our origins, to our Civil War, to our climb out of the Great Depression, to the war that really helped save the world, and then Reagan's stance about the goodness and the decency of this country, and a stand against what communists and socialists really stood for. That's it to me. Lincoln's. It is Edward Everett was right. Lincoln said in about 8.5 seconds what Everett had tried for, not just that day, but for weeks to make it perfect.
Get every little detail, craft the perfect story.
Lincoln just walks in and mic drops it. Here you go. This is what we're doing.
Yeah. I think it's naturally it's one of the greatest speeches. School kids kind of are taught it and memorize it. It's one of those things that gets tucked in when you're learning about the Civil War. You get Manassas, you get Gettysburg, you get the Gettysburg Address, and then the war's over. And that's kind of the curriculum. But I think too, when you kind of bust up the speech and you look at some of the things he's saying, the world will no longer remember what we say here. Well, here we are, still talking. But it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they who have fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is for us, rather, to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take up an increased devotion to the cause which they gave their last full measure of devotion.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall.
We have nothing to fear but fear itself.
Right, a day that will live in infamy.
Yep.
That was a rallying cry. Reagan was pushing. I can't quite. I think Washington. It was more about what he did rather than often what he said. But that fits in there because, most people, I think, don't even know the bulk of the speech. They know a few words of it. So most people, I think, Lincoln was right. Most people today, I think, actually have forgotten what the point of the conversation was that day. I think a lot of people, if you polled them, which is not, you could poll people on any element of history. If you asked them, why did he give the Gettysburg Address? What's its focus? I bet a lot of people would say it's about the Battle of Gettysburg. And it has almost nothing to do with the Battle of Gettysburg, except that he was there to remember those who had died defending the United States. But that was part of a larger discussion.
Right.
And I think to bring up Everett again, I think Edward Everett realized in hindsight he'd missed the whole point. And Lincoln was always throughout the 1850s spot on about what the point was. Kansas, Nebraska, Dred Scott, secession, the cost of war.
This is what we were talking about yesterday, is that the Gettysburg Address, while it's a pivot in the war, it's just another step for him in kind of the same message. Starting back, house divided against itself cannot stand, will be all of one thing or all of the other. He's showing us here that the war is bringing us to that point where we're either going to be all free or not.
And that's
the nation will live or it won't.
And that's a good point for, I think, everyone to reflect on, because on that day, this is before Ulysses S. Grant has won at Chattanooga. It's literally days before it. So that's before Grant goes east, where most people's memory of Grant actually resides. And what does he go east to do?
Go and take on Lee.
And take on Lee. So it's before that. It's a year before Lincoln's election. It's before the Battle of the Wilderness. It's before the Battle of Cold Harbor. It's before Spotsylvania. It's before Franklin.
Atlanta.
Right.
Yeah.
It's before Sherman's, march to the sea. This is all yet to be decided. And the outcome wasn't clear in 63. So it is a pivot, but it is again a rallying cry about we must see this to its conclusion. And I encourage everyone, if you've never been to the Lincoln Memorial, and if you refuse to go, that's your problem. It is. It really is. I mean, if you refuse to go see the Lincoln Memorial, I don't know what's wrong with you.
Yeah.
I mean, some people just may not be interested, don't get me wrong, but you know who we're talking
Right,
about.
yeah,
There's people, well, Lincoln's horrible. Oh, please, get over yourself.
Yeah.
Go see it, stand there, and think about Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, Martin Luther King, those who gave their lives in the Second World War and in Korea and in Vietnam, because this country, for all of its imperfections, has always strove to be a symbol of progress, of liberty, of equality, although it took us a while, with many of these things. And he's a man of his era, too. That's how these men, I think, why they're so important, because it isn't about what we're doing right now. It is about the future. It is about... Think if you could, I've said this many times, if you could pull Jefferson Davis out of a time warp, I think Jefferson Davis would look at the 21st century America and would go, ew, this is not what I thought we would be. I think Lincoln would take some adjusting. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
But eventually I think Lincoln would look around and go, I don't have to agree with everything, but this is pretty good. This is pretty good. I think Washington would. I think most people who fought, defended, and stood up for this, Frederick Douglass, Martin Luther King, I think they would look at this and say, wow, we've got work to do, but wow, here we are. It's 2023. The Constitution as Abraham Lincoln knew it, the Bill of Rights is all there. Slavery's been ended, other amendments, but still the core, the heartbeat of the country is there. He helped save it. And that, I don't know, some people think, I guess it would have been better if the United States would have been broken apart. And I've never understood that argument, ever. So if you get a chance, go to the memorial, go to Gettysburg.
Yeah, the National Cemetery is incredible.
Yeah. For me, walking first day, second day, third day, all super cool stuff. But going to that place,
stand where they stood, think about the words he said, see the just immense casualties.
And to think about that day where the smell of death was still in the air.
Because it's still, the cemetery's not finished. They're still in the reburial process when he goes too.
Yeah, he doesn't walk into a pristine environment like, what we have known for well over a century. He walks into a town that's still suffering, and they're still dealing with literally the smell of death, but death itself and the burying of the bodies, and then he goes home and he lives how much longer? 16, 17 months. Yeah. And then he's gone. So if you get a chance, go see it. 160th is coming up in, I guess, by the time this gets out, it'll be just a day or two before it. But I think, again, not only an important speech, but one of the most important people that has really ever existed in the history of this country, but particularly American politics.
I agree totally.
All right, thanks.